Hey everyone, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a truly fascinating concept straight out of the popular audiobook, The Smart Borrower. Look, if you've ever felt like the whole financial deck is just completely stacked against you, you are definitely going to want to pay close attention. We're about to set the stage for a total mindset shift when it comes to money, debt, and how the banking system actually operates for people who know the rules.
So think about this for a second. What if the exact system that's keeping you trapped could actually be used to build your wealth? It's a pretty provocative question, right? For most of us, banks are basically just a drain on our resources. They're places that charge us interest and keep us tied down to endless monthly payments. But the source material asks us to completely challenge those deeply held beliefs right out of the gate. What if the very mechanism keeping millions of people struggling could be the engine you use to get ahead?
To figure that out, we're going to extract 5 distinct nuggets of financial intelligence today. We'll decode the emotional debt trap, contrast good debt versus bad debt, unpack the illusion of ownership, compare consumers versus asset builders, and then finally, we'll talk about mastering strategic leverage. Let's start that transition from a basic consumer to a true asset builder.
All right, jumping right into nugget number 1, the emotional debt trap. Let's talk about the psychology of debt. Before we dive into the hard numbers or the mechanics of leverage, we really have to talk about the human mind and the hidden psychology of credit. The source drops this incredibly blunt truth. Banks profit from emotional borrowers. See, the banking system is essentially designed from the ground up to capitalize on our worst habits. Whenever we swipe a credit card for a little retail therapy after a totally stressful Tuesday at work, or we buy a flashy new gadget just to chase that fleeting feeling of status, the bank is just quietly cashing in on our lack of discipline. And it plays out in this really predictable psychological cycle. First, an emotional trigger hits you. Second, you seek immediate gratification through an unplanned purchase. And third, well, you end up in a long-term financial trap, paying interest on a thing you probably completely forgot you even bought a year later. Getting a grip on your emotional control is honestly one of the greatest financial skills you can develop. Without it, you're literally just feeding the bank's bottom line. Moving right along to section 2, good debt versus bad debt. Because look, not all debt is created equal. This is where we really need to rewire how we view borrowing. Growing up, we're taught that debt is this heavy weight around our necks, something to avoid at all costs. But the wealthy, they view it as a neutral tool. On one hand, you have bad debt. That's your reckless spending on depreciating items, cars, designer clothes, big vacations put on high-interest cards. But on the other hand, you have good debt. That is strategic borrowing used specifically to acquire cash-flowing assets. The wealthy don't avoid debt. They actually embrace it. They just strictly avoid the bad kind. Now, a quick reality check here. Strategic borrowing requires serious financial intelligence. You can't just run down to the local bank branch, borrow a massive sum of money, and expect to magically get rich overnight. Using good debt is calculated. It requires extreme discipline, a real understanding of risk, and a solid foundation of financial education. Which brings us to section 3, the illusion of ownership. Let's break down the trap of constantly upgrading. The traditional American dream tells us to just buy things, pay them off, and own them outright. But modern wealth creation plays by a totally different set of rules, mainly to avoid this vicious cycle we see all the time. Step 1, you earn more money. Hey, maybe you get a great promotion. Awesome. Step 2, you immediately upgrade your lifestyle. You buy a bigger house, maybe a luxury car to show off a bit. This is classic lifestyle inflation. And then step 3, because of all those fancy new upgrades, you actually sink much deeper into bad debt. Earning a higher salary often just ends up funding more expensive traps. To break free from that cycle, you have to realize that true ownership actually equals long-term financial control. Wealthy folks think very differently about what it means to own something. They prioritize cash flow and control over just possessing a shiny, expensive item that drains their bank account every single month. Bottom line, if it doesn't put money in your pocket, it's a liability, and it doesn't matter whose name is on the title. All right, section 4, consumers versus asset builders. 2 very different financial paths. When you really zoom out on the financial system, there are basically only 2 roles you can play. You have consumers. These are the folks who work incredibly hard for their money, and the second it hits their checking account, they rush to spend it. And then you have asset builders. These people figure out how to make banks and money work for them. This is the fundamental mindset shift. It's the exact dividing line separating those who stay perpetually broke from the people who quietly build massive wealth behind the scenes. Let's actually systematically break down the data from the audiobook on this. Look at how these 2 groups approach income. Consumers rely entirely on a salary, while asset builders focus on creating cash flow. When it comes to money habits, consumers default to spending, while asset builders default to investing. And then look at mindset. Consumers usually operate out of fear, specifically the fear of debt. But asset builders operate using intelligence. They take the time to learn the rules of the game so they don't have to be afraid of it. And that leads us to our fifth and final nugget, mastering strategic leverage, the secret to multiplying money. If you've ever found yourself wondering how the rich multiply their wealth so fast, well, this is the exact mechanism. Keeping it totally jargon-free, leverage is simply using borrowed capital, meaning the bank's money, to increase the potential return on an investment. So instead of using 100% of their own cash to buy a single asset, the wealthy might use 20% of their own cash, 80% of the bank's cash, and then they keep the rest of their own money free to go out and buy even more assets. It's a total game changer.
So how do you actually put this into practice and make banks pay you? The audiobook lays out a really clear strategy. Number 1, overcome your financial fear by educating yourself, period. Number 2, direct your borrowed capital strictly into income-producing assets, never liabilities. Number 3, be patient. Let compound growth do the heavy lifting for you over time. And number 4, watch as those assets generate the cash flow required to achieve true financial freedom. You are taking the exact same banking system that traps uninformed people, but you're flipping the script to build your own generational wealth.
When you step back, this entire explainer really boils down to one core transformation. You are moving from being a victim of the system to becoming a strategic player within it. Once you truly understand the psychology of your spending habits, the reality of good debt, and the incredible power of leverage, you stop letting the banks dictate your financial life. You start dictating exactly how your money works for you. As we wrap things up today, I want to leave you with a deeply provocative thought to chew on. Take a hard look at your own bank statements this month. Look at your daily choices and ask yourself honestly, are your current cash flow habits building an asset, or are they just digging a trap? Honestly, it is the most important question you can ask yourself right now. Take control, educate yourself, and start building those assets. Thanks so much for learning with us today, and I'll see you on the next explainer.